All right, welcome to the first episode of For the Fowlers podcast. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Caden.
Caden, here we are, man. Episode 1.
Well, we finally did it.
I know we've been talking about this for a while, and it's crazy it's finally here, and I feel like we've been talking about this for a few years now, but we're on the cusp of another season, and what better time than now?
I feel like if we weren't going to do it now, it was never going to happen, so I'm glad we pulled the trigger.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, obviously, we talked about starting this podcast a couple of years ago, and, it's funny, we're always talking to hunting year round, and sometimes I tell folks, I'm like, man, why don't we just record that phone call and, post that, and there you go, a little natural podcast. But I figured we'd actually do an actual podcast now, so.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, obviously we've talked a little bit about this. I mentioned it's called For the Fowlers, and really it's a podcast by Fowlers for Fowlers. And, when we think of Fowlers, we're obviously talking about waterfowl, but, I know you and I do a little bit of upland hunting as well. Dove, I know you're big into turkey hunting.
Yeah, turkey's fun and definitely good to get into it.
Yeah, did you get out and do any dove hunting this year? We haven't talked.
Just a private land hunt with family member of mine, and had a little bit of success, but family and work this year, it's been a little hectic, and then just getting ready for the duck season's been the main focus.
No, I hear you for sure. Family, as you know, I just had my first little one in the family, and, he was born end of July, so there was really no way that I was going to be able to get out on September 1st to go out and hunt dove up here in California, but normally I use that as kind of my tune-up for waterfowl season.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. You chose the year you had your first kid. I had my third kid, and we got a few extra rice blinds that I'm hunting. This might be our busiest year to also add a podcast to the plate. I like it.
Yeah, that's what's funny is I know that, you and, our good buddy Chuck invited me to get in on those blinds this year, but I just didn't know how much time I was going to be able to commit to, actually getting out this season. And like you said, here I am diving into a podcast. So I should have just dove right into those blinds as well.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I mentioned Chuck, another buddy of ours that we hunt with throughout the season, but, a little bit about the guys in our group. I mentioned, we do dove, turkey, pheasant, but, a couple guys in our group, they also like to hunt deer, do some pig out here in Northern California. But for us, we're mostly going to be focused on waterfowl for the sake of this podcast. But, Kane, we haven't really talked. Have you ever gone deer hunting?
I have not. Living up in Shasta County, I'm just surrounded by a bunch of deer hunters, big game hunters, whether it's, in California or a lot of guys traveling out of state. I get a lot of offers and I'm ready to pull the trigger. But to be honest, with 3 kids right now, I just need to focus on work, family, and duck hunting. And as they get older, we'll probably venture out into some bigger game.
Yeah, I hear you there. I've gone deer hunting a couple seasons, but never any success. But yeah, I've been getting some pictures from some buddies the past couple of weeks who are having some success out here this year. So that's good to see. And, I really enjoy that pig hunting. I did that a few years ago when I was getting into waterfowl hunting, and it was a lot of fun doing a lot of that kind of down in the Monterey area, tons of pig down there, but some good opportunities. We had some access to some private land. So it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we keep talking about NorCal and everything. And, when it comes to this podcast, we're obviously based in Northern California. You said you're up in Shasta County. I'm down here outside Sacramento. But yeah, our kind of goal for this podcast, you and I chatted, was to be Northern California focused. I mean, that's where you and I, that's where we do our hunting, everywhere from the Grasslands. I know when we were living in the Bay Area, you and I spent some time out on the Bay, but, seems like now we're primarily in the Sacramento Valley.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you hit the nail on the head. We started Grasslands and then the Bay Area, the Suisun marsh, but slowly but surely we've made our way north and even dabbled up. I mean, we hunted the Northeastern when we were lucky enough to get a good draw a couple of years ago, and now that I've lived a lot closer. I dabble up in the Northeastern, so I definitely think that's going to be our main focus.
Yeah, I know you went out and, did some junior hunting with some buddies this year, but did you get out and do any of the Northeastern Open yourself?
No, I didn't get any draws, and with work, I was working on the opener, and I didn't have any draws. So this weekend rolled around. I'm actually probably hoping to head out earlier this week. That's the goal. Got to pass it by the boss and see if she'll let me take a day off of work, but we'll see. Weather's kind of cooperating right now. We got a whole week of cold weather and rain up here in Shasta County, so we'll see if that helps move some birds around or bring some birds. I mean, it's early. It's that crazy time of year where we'll have 40 degrees at night and it could be 80, 90 degrees during the day. So who knows what the birds are thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one way or the other, just let us know down here when they're making their way down south.
Hopefully I'll scare a few.
Yeah, you mentioned the Northeastern. That was a fun trip. That was a few years ago now, and all those years we've been putting in for the Northeastern opener. I finally had that draw. I think you and I, we were in the Bay Area at the time, and we made that trek. We stayed up just on the other side of the state line up in Oregon, but that was a fun hunt, man.
Yeah, that was a good time. I mean, it was my first. It kind of opened my eyes up to where else you can duck hunt in California. Me and our group of friends. Obviously, I'm probably the newest hunter. It's about my 5th or 6th season, but I felt like when I started, it was a hunt as close as I could to home and figure it out. And I slowly started venturing, a little bit further out, and then all of a sudden, we ended up in the Northeastern. I'm like, oh, this is whole new can of worms. And moving up here, it's been a great learning experience. A lot of new habitat, a lot of new areas. A little bit different style of hunting, different backdrops. I mean, it seems like when you're in the valley or even in the grasslands, it's, similar backdrops, but you get up in the mountains and all of a sudden you're trying to have to pick out birds with, pine tree mountains in the backgrounds and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, definitely one of my goals, maybe not for this season, but, the next year or two, I definitely want to try to do more hunting trips, get out of the valley a little bit, get out of the refuge, get out of the rice. And, like you said, it's completely different up there. And yeah, it's just an absolute blast.
Yeah. And we definitely got to do it, especially maybe even that Canada trip I told you about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we'll hopefully talk to some folks in a future episode about that trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we'll be mostly talking about hunting in Northern California, but it seems like we're talking hunting all the time. We obviously love sharing our experiences with each other, our friends, family, kind of whoever will listen. But, with that said, we do have an Instagram page for the Fowlers, @for the Fowlers, FOR, the FOWLERS. But I mentioned that because we'd love to hear from others as well. Send us a follow if you hear us on the podcast, and that's how you find us. Shoot us a message. We'd love to interact with you. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what kind of hunting you like doing. We'd love to hear from you.
And when Brandon says that, he means it. You'll hear us say this a bunch. We're just a couple of guys, and whether it's me and Brandon or Brandon and I or Chuck and I, that's all we always say is we're just a couple of guys. We're not the best out here. We're just a couple of guys in the blind who like to occasionally shoot at some ducks, but it's all about the experience for us. So if you got something to share, we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned that couple of guys. And before we kind of dive into this podcast, I do want to kind of echo that we don't claim to be experts. We're not professionals. We're not running a guide service. We're not, we don't have any sponsors, none of that stuff. Like we just are, those weekend warriors. We get out throughout the week, when possible, obviously, work dependent on that one. And, but no, we love getting out. We love spending time in the marsh, out in those rice fields, and just enjoy spending time with fellow hunters.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, speaking of hunters, when we were talking about what we wanted this podcast to be, it's really kind of twofold here. It's like we want it to be a podcast for new hunters who, may or may not have a mentor to get started. I don't want to speak for you, Caden, but for me, like I had to learn on the fly. I had a good buddy of mine, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but a good buddy of mine that it got me into it. I didn't grow up in a hunting family by any means. Did a little fishing, little camping, but that was the extent of my outdoors experience. But, we would love to kind of have this podcast for folks to feel comfortable to come on and learn, about the hobby that we enjoy so much.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not speak. I think a lot of us are in the same boat of you didn't grow up hunting. You're learning as an adult, and it's a humbling experience. So this is hopefully a spot for some new guys and gals who are looking for maybe a platform to hear a few tips and tricks, or just know that they're not alone out there. At some point, we were all there trying to figure it out, whether, you're 10 years old in the blind with your dad or your mom, or you're 30 years old and out with some buddies that you met at work.
Absolutely. And, like you heard Caton say, I think he's 5 or 6 seasons in. I was trying to look back. I think I'm somewhere between 10 and 12 seasons in. I was trying to figure out what opening day this is going to be for me. But, that being said, we, have learned quite a bit, but once again, we're not experts, but we do hope to discuss some topics and hopefully have some guests on here along the way for those experienced hunters, and we were kind of talking about, maybe we do episodes around gear reviews or various hunt setups, different ways to hunt waterfowl, depending on when, what time of year, what time of day, when you're hunting, where you're hunting.
Yeah. I think you hit decoys, things like that. Just preference. I mean, things we've learned along the way. Shortcut. It's probably the most expensive. Now, bass fishing does a pretty good probably does a good job at that, but it's one of the most expensive.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that little technical difficulty. I think, Caton, when I lost you, you were talking about, kind of hunt setups, but different ways to hunt waterfowl, some stuff about decoys and money to spend and all that.
Yeah, we were just talking about some of the topics we're going to cover over, and I, circling back to not being professionals or being new coming into this sport. There's a lot of gear out there, and with waterfowl hunting, you could probably spend a small fortune. And, we just hopefully give you some pointers of things that are definitely worth the investment, and some things you can go down to Wally World and get, or they're going to work just as good as, the most expensive item there is out there to buy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we were kind of talking about future episodes. I think one of the ones we're going to do in the very near future is kind of what you need to get started. And obviously, we're not telling you to go out and spend $1,000 on waders or $2,500 on a shotgun. So there's obviously some cost-friendly, great items out there to figure out, hey, if this sport's for you before you go out and, like you said, absolutely break the bank, because it does not, even when you think you have everything, you end up spending more.
Oh, yeah.
Especially as that season comes up, we end up getting things that just to replace things that are absolutely still perfect and in the best shape, but hey, we got to have the latest and greatest.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so I mean, like I said, we'll talk to new hunters. We'll talk a little bit about experienced hunters. Really, this podcast is going to be for all waterfowlers. We'll obviously focus on Northern California, but our hope is that maybe someone in another region or part of the country or different flyway find some value or some interest in what we have to talk about here in NorCal. We obviously plan to connect with hunters from other flyways. I got some buddies that hunt in the Mississippi flyway. Obviously, for my company, I work with folks all throughout the country, and I know some of them are hunters as well, so it'd be kind of cool to hear from them, and we'll hopefully have some good guests on along the way, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, so, well, what do you say we talk a little bit about ourselves here, let the folks get to know us a little bit, but a little bit about who we are is, and Caton touched on it, we're just a couple of guys, we're a group of hunting buddies from Northern California. We obviously love hunting waterfowl. We love everything that comes with it. I don't want to speak for you, but it's funny, if the alarm clock goes off for work, I tend to hit snooze a couple times, but I feel like when the alarm clock's set for 2, 3, 4 in the morning, when it comes to duck hunting, I'm up well before that alarm goes off.
Especially this time of year. I mean, now that it's getting dark or staying dark longer in the mornings, I've got a good enough gig where I'm not always getting up super early, but the other day I had to be at work by 5 a.m. and I woke up, dragged my feet down the hallway and got out of the house. But I was, riding in, I was like, well, if I want to go duck hunting this weekend, I got to get up at 2 hours earlier than this. I'm like, I could do that.
Oh yeah,
That doesn't seem too bad.
for sure. And I mean, I know, you have your blinds and your rice blinds, but, this year I plan on hitting those refuges hard. And, whether it's those late nights doing a lottery run, at that, what we like to call the camo convention at the check station, or, those early mornings just trying to get on wherever we can. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Um,
So a little bit back about yourself. What did you want to cover on that? Do you want to go a little bit about what we're doing or what got us into it?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're probably, how we got into hunting, our first experiences, stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, I didn't really have anyone like in my family that was big into hunting. No one was against it, but just no one to really show me the way. And when I was in college, my roommate got into it, but I just wasn't too interested. I remember going with him to Sportsman's, and he was picking up his shotgun, but it just wasn't something that I was looking to start at that time. But when I graduated college and I moved back to the Bay Area, my neighbor, I mentioned him earlier, good old Dan Garza, big time hunter, fisherman, all that stuff. He's really my mentor when it comes to hunting, and he gave me that kind of first experience. And it's funny. I look at where I was then and where I am now. I was mentioning here, like, hey, why don't we talk about our first pieces of gear? My first hunt that I went on, I wouldn't even say it was a hunt yet. He's like, hey, just come out. He was hunting the bay. He had his Mud Buddy boat out in the sloughs in the south part of the bay there in the Alviso area. And he went out hunting that morning. He's like, hey, come on out middle of the day. I'll pick you up from the dock and, I'll kind of show you what's what out here. So here I am thinking I need to get all camoed out, right? So I go to guns fishing, other stuff there by our house. And, I end up buying like all this like deer woodland camo.
Oh yeah.
Basically with blaze orange on the front, and not realizing that the name of the game is concealment, right? So, I show up with him and, go out there and I'm getting hooked, just, cruising on that Mud Buddy through the sloughs, seeing those birds work, he's out jumping birds. It was just a blast. So, my first actual hunt, I remember it like it was yesterday. I joined Dan on a reservation at Delavan. That was the first refuge I ever went to, and what an experience. But I remember going out there, same thing. My first waders, we talked about getting in kind of cheap. My first waders were these Pro-Line waders, like that basically were like MC Hammer pants. Like every time I sat down, like they just filled up with air and they were all puffed up. And I get a little heat for my first gun because I loved it, but my first shotgun was the Benelli Supernova, which looking back on it now that's like swinging a weight. It's heavy, it's bulky, but hey, it got the job done. But I was absolutely hooked from that first experience. It was a long day, out at Delavan, but we got into some birds and it was an absolute blast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. But how'd you get into it? I know you said it's only been a few years, and I was trying to think. I know we've been hunting together for quite a while, but I know I didn't get you into it. How'd you get exposed to duck hunting?
Well, when you told me we were doing the podcast, I kind of had to think back on it for a little bit. And, well, these guys don't know me yet, but they'll get to know me. I'm a little bit of a space cadet sometimes. But I was thinking, I'm like, why didn't I ever really get into it? And I remember being super young, probably under 10 years old. And my dad had a little tin of dried rabbit meat, and I was eating it, and I was like, where do we even get this? I couldn't even wrap my head around it. And he told me, oh, Grandpa got it. And I was like, oh. And he told me what hunting was, and I asked why he didn't go hunting. And he kind of told me a long, boring story about he went out hunting with his dad when he was a kid, and he didn't enjoy it, and that's kind of how it was. And I never thought much of it. Well, about the time we started working together, I was meeting more and more friends through work, and I realized, shoot, all these guys do is go hunt. And I'm like, I'd love to go do that, but as a lot of us know, it's not exactly something, or it's a little intimidating just to be able to go do. It's also a little bit of an investment. You got to go pick up a gun. There's waders, specifically duck hunting, and that's what our friends were doing at the time. I was lucky enough to, let's see here, let me think. I think I bugged a few guys, and one of our mutual coworkers out of the North Bay had a blind with a couple of his coworkers. And one day he's like, "Hey, you want to come out and hunt?" Sure, whatever that meant. He gave me, I think he brought up a shotgun. Couldn't even tell you what it was, what gauge or anything it was, because we never pulled the trigger. But, I think that's when I knew I was in trouble, because I was hooked. We went out there up to a rice blind somewhere near a little dry creek, and we sat out there. It was hot. It was early season. I was sweating. I was hungry. I was a little hungover, and I was just waiting for a bird. And I think I saw a couple pigeons, and I was about as excited as I got, and I was hooked. I didn't even have to see a duck. I think by the end of the day, our buddy ended up shooting one little teal, but that was about it. And I was ready to go. And from there, it was just kind of filling in the pieces, talking to friends, putting myself out there a little bit, and eventually getting in a situation where I wasn't a hindrance. You always want to go out with some friends, but you don't want to hold them back. And, that's when I started talking to you. We went on a few hunts, and I just kind of started building the skill set, so to speak.
Yeah, it's funny. The other day I was going through some old text messages, and I was, trying to kind of think back to our time hunting together, and we had a group chat with another buddy that we hunt with, and God, I want to say like it was maybe your first time at Grizzly, like maybe was that your first refuge? I'm trying to remember where it was, but it's funny. It's basically like, hey, what do I need? You had to make sure that you had all the right paperwork, all the right stamps, the right day pass, all those things. But, that's really what we hope that this podcast will do is, we'll talk a little bit about that on a future episode, everything that you need to, get out and, be ready to go out and hunt.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, it's funny. You talked a little bit about when we started hunting together. I was trying to figure out some of our first hunts. I know I mentioned Grizzly Island when we were out kind of free roaming there, asking people, asking the people for their X's on Onyx, and, it was just to make sure that, we were kind of going in the right spot, because that place is an absolute, you can get lost out there easy.
Well, I'd say that's kind of the evolution. And I kind of lost my train of thought there. I was like looking back at my notes, but you go from getting a few invites out, going to a rice blind, not seeing any birds. I think it was my cousin invited me out to a refuge hunt. It was actually Kesterson. That was my first refuge. And it was, I just remember a huge storm. I don't know if it was flooding. I've been to that blind since then, and I know the water's only about knee deep, but I was borrowing your waders, which had about a quarter size hole in them. We're walking out, water's up to my chest. I'm, freezing my ass off. It was, again, still a great time. But you go from that to hunting a few times with Grizzly, and all of a sudden you get to this point. It's like, hey, I want to be able to hunt on my own. Not necessarily I don't like going with you or going with Chuck or whoever it is, but sometimes you guys are busy or you have other hunts, and it's like, I want to go on my own. And that's where I think that Grizzly stuff started coming in, because back where we used to live, it was only an hour from our house.
Yeah. Yep.
And I just remember and I do feel for all those, I'm going to call them grown adult new hunters. It's a humbling experience, especially if you go to Grizzly, not standing because you're sitting in the car line, sitting in that car line, whether it's the sweat line or you're lucky. Well, I don't know if you're lucky at Grizzly, but you're lucky enough to have a resi, and then figuring it out and doing that full on sprint. I mean, I think I started within my second hunt at Grizzly. I had a camoed out bicycle, a backpack, a little mini sled, and I was set. But, walking out into a marsh at 3 a.m., middle or 4 a.m., whatever the time is for that time of year, by yourself, it's intimidating. So that was definitely when I knew. I was like, all right, I like this. I can do this. And then I went out there. I was like, okay, this is for me. Because you're standing in the water, you don't know where you're going. You're trying to figure it out. You do the best you can scouting, but at the end of the day, you just need to put some waders in the water to really get a feel for it.
Yeah, it's interesting, those public spots that are mostly free roam, Grizzly, I think Gray Lodge, but, you mentioned Grizzly, and being that it was so close to our house a few years ago, we did spend a lot of time up there. And I will say some of my best hunts were there, but also some of my worst hunts were there. And when I say worst, I mean, you spend more time, moving around or arguing with guys that want to set up on top of you. It's just really not a good experience. So like you said, it's humbling, especially for those new folks. But yeah, we learned how to do it. And, I remember the first time I, went out by myself, and what a feeling, because, the success that you have, that's all because of what you did, the way where you decided to sit, whether it's in the tuiles or whatever blind you chose, however you set the decoys, you're the one calling them in, you're the one pulling the trigger, you're the one getting those birds. It's all on you. And it's almost kind of like a graduation, if you will, when you go out by yourself.
Oh yeah, that first solo limit is, I think, the ultimate graduation. You're like, I did it. All 7 of them, and they're legal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, we were talking a little bit about, public land, and, we were just talking about the Suisun marsh and stuff like that. We keep saying, hey, this is all about Northern California waterfowl hunting. Why don't we talk a little bit about like these different regions, if you will, and I kind of have them listed out, and I'm sure some listener out there might be like, oh, you missed this one or whatever. But for our purposes, obviously we talked a little bit about it earlier, hunting the bay. You and I spent some time out there. I absolutely loved when I lived in the Bay Area, hunting Eden Landing, a fun spot to go free roam, but that was definitely a place that you needed to know where you were going, because you take one wrong step and you're cresting your waders or you're getting stuck in the muck. But, it's a fun shoot, and a bunch of spoonies and widgeon, occasional pintail, but tons of divers. I'll admit, I'm not too proud. I'm not going to be one of those guys that says I only shoot greenheads and whatnot.
Well, you gotta know your crowd. If you're out you're out in the bay, you're going to be hunting a different. You're not going to find a whole lot of greenheads out there. So
yeah.
Well,
How about this one? I've been out there a couple times, but I don't really have too much experience here. But how about the Delta? You know anything about hunting the Delta?
I've my what is it? My cousin's husband. He's a big Delta guy. I've gone out one time. Well, I don't even say. I would say I haven't even really gone out. I've gone out in the afternoon with them. We kind of checked out some spots, but man, the Delta is a pretty unique beast, because I mean it's pretty broad term when you think about it, because it spans pretty far. You got Old River, or you go the New River, which goes up towards. I might be butchering this a little bit, but up towards the Sacramento area. But I've heard, you hear some horror stories out there of some very competitive, very protective guys out there who are always, they got their spots, and they've had those spots passed down, whether it's from friend to friend, or, their father and their grandfather told them before. Because you hear stories, these guys will, block off levees and hide, which is good. They're hiding their blinds and stuff. They're leaving their decoys out there. So I personally never I was, when I was living down there, that was my goal, was maybe get a boat and start hitting the Delta. But it was definitely something I was warned about, which is a bummer. You hate to hear that, but I also get it. It's competitive. It's basically the ultimate public land. You don't need a resi or anything. You just need a boat to go out there and get it. So
yeah, I see
it from both sides.
Yeah, I even heard you mentioned those blinds, and that it's kind of a first come first serve. Like no one really owns the blinds that are out floating out there. But yeah, we'll have to have your cousin's husband on one time to talk a little bit about the Delta. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely is interesting. And I know a lot of guys. I mean, I've seen some great straps come out of there. He has some great stories. Definitely got to time it right. But I love the Delta. I'm a summer Delta guy, though. I'm always out there skiing and wakeboarding, so a little bit different. If you need any pointers for that, I'm your guy.
Oh, definitely, man. You're the only one that's been able to get me up on that wake skate in the Delta.
Oh, there you go.
But hey, kind of moving along here, we talked a little bit about the Suisun marsh there. We spent some time in our early hunting years out there. I'll be honest with you, I haven't hunted the Suisun area in a couple of years now.
Yeah, ever since I moved, I haven't gone back, but it's still the place I put in for every opener, just because if I draw it and I got nothing else, I'm absolutely going there, because I put in, in my opinion, I put in a good amount of work back when I was down there. I was going a couple times a week, finding some new X's, talking to the check station staff, and, learning some things. So I was able to pretty consistently go out there and get a good set of birds, have some success. But I love it out there. specifically grizzly. I mean, we've hunted. Did you hunt Joyce with me? Joyce Island?
No, I didn't, but we hunted those blinds on the northern end, and yeah, I put in for Joyce Island too, because that's the one that opens up in December, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all this for me. It's all the same because I've only hunted those three spots that we've talked about, and I love it. It's different. I know a lot of people don't like it, and that's probably why I like it because it's an opportunity to get to a spot that people don't always want to put the work in. People want to take the short walk. They find the first water and they sit in, and Grizzly's just such a big refuge, and it's just a good time. But, if the birds aren't there, the birds aren't there. So it's a good time.
I'm not sure when we're going to actually, release this episode, but, it's the week before the opener for Balance of the State. And you mentioned putting in for Grizzly Island for opening day. And let me ask you something. As we sit here on Sunday evening, what are the chances of anyone already being in line for a resi for opening day at Grizzly?
Oh, tonight, there might be someone tonight. If not, I would put on a significant amount of money by tomorrow. There will be probably there's some guy with a white blazer who should be up there.
Yeah, no, it's, for some of the listeners out there, Grizzly Island's one of those places where it doesn't matter if you're reservation number 1 or resi number 150, you get in line, and some folks are out there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday before the opener, just camped out on that road.
Yep, exactly. This is totally off topic, and you're probably not even going to want to. I've just got to bring it up because it's in my head, and it's going to be funny because we're talking about Grizzly Island, and I know there's podcasts out there, and there's Facebook, NorCal refuge page, all that different stuff. It talks about things, and people always get fired up when you start bringing up spots. And just a word to the listeners: when we're talking about refuges, it's a refuge. It's public land. We're never going to go out and give you an X, but I don't think there's a square inch of any refuge in the state of California that a hunter hasn't put his wader boot on yet. So we're not trying to ruin anyone's perfect spot. I think we all know about it, right?
Absolutely. That's a great call out. It's funny. We were talking about some other podcasts that we listened to, and early on we'd be like, okay, we know which area they're from. Hey, what refuge do you think they're talking about? And then I'm pretty sure we were pretty close to a couple of them knowing which refuge they were talking about. But here's the deal. We never saw them out there. They never saw us, and it's big places, so it's all good.
I mean, like at the end of the day, especially now that we hunt up north, like we all know if you're hunting a refuge north of Sacramento, like they're probably the 4 or 5 biggest refuges or most popular ones. We have no special tips or tricks for a refuge. I guarantee that.
Absolutely.
So we're just gonna use the name of the refuge so that way it sounds good.
Absolutely. Well, hey, you mentioned that we're up north now, but before we dive into the Sac Valley, why don't we talk a little bit about the Grasslands? I think that was kind of your and I's favorite place to go hunt when we were living in the Bay Area if we weren't running around Grizzly Island.
Yeah, Grasslands it's definitely being the new guy back then, or I'm still the new guy. I remember, we're going to go hunt the Grasslands. And I'm like, and at the time I was in a sales position. I covered all the way down to Bakersfield. I'm like, I've driven every inch of I-5 and every inch of 99. There's no ducks. There's no water. There's nothing out there. I don't know what you're talking about. But no, sure as shit, there's water out there. There's some ducks. It's a good time. I definitely recommend, to those people who haven't tried it, go take a peek.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I mean, obviously they get all the same birds down there, but as you and I know, you can easily fill your strap full of teal pretty early on. But hey, that's fun shooting down there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then kind of the last region we'll talk about is the Sacramento Valley. And, when we mention that area, we're basically talking from, as far south as Yolo, all the way up north of the Buttes there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that's what when people talk about California duck hunting, I think they picture, those refuges with whether you're, you got the Buttes in the background, or you're hunting a rice field. I mean, there's very iconic shots out there. There's obviously a lot of birds, but I think from my understanding, I mean, it's always changing. I mean, you sit in some of these refuge lines and you talk to the old timers, and all they do is talk about the good old days. And
yep.
Here I am just hoping I can, get a taste of those good old days. So, we say the Sac Valley is, was that gold standard, and I'm hoping it keeps that.
Absolutely. I think what's so cool about the Sacramento Valley, obviously the proximity to where you and I live, and it's easy for us to still get together, throughout the season and hunt together. But, there's so many different types of hunting out here. I mean, you can go hunt the marshlands, on the refuge properties. Obviously, this is rice country, so there's flooded rice fields up and down the valley here. There's some dry field hunting, some great, speck and snow goose hunting. But then, right there, we were talking about the buttes, some of those multi-million-dollar clubs that are right there that are just seem to be, a magnet for some of the best waterfowl in the entire state, if not the country.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's all about just location, whether you're talking, on the broad spectrum of just generally, whether it's the Butte Sink or further north or something like that. You just got to be on the flyway, or if you're all the way down to the refuge, got to be where the birds are.
Yeah, it'll be cool. Maybe we can connect with, your good buddy up there that has one of those clubs in the Buttes and talk to him a little bit about that. And, I'd love to hear, how that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to start bugging him a little bit.
Yeah. And, it's funny, speaking of the Buttes, you and I don't want to jinx it, but we have a nice little invite for next week to go hunt a pretty cool property out there for the second time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for that. Any invite to a spot that I normally can't hunt is always a welcome one.
Yeah, that's how I feel for sure. It's definitely a great opportunity, and I think we were kind of talking about maybe doing an episode from there with, obviously you and I, and we know there will be some other hunters there, so maybe we'll get to know some folks out there.
Yeah, it'll be a good time.
So, we talked about the Bay, Delta, the Suisun area, Grasslands, Sacramento Valley. Caden, what's your favorite region and why? Or, obviously I have my favorite, but what's yours?
Oh man, my favorite region. I think I'm going to have to lean on the Sac Valley. I mean, that was one of the biggest deciding factors for me to come up. You get a little bit of everything for the most part. I mean, the refuges are great. I'd say the biggest drawback's the crowd. I mean, everyone wants to come up here, but now, getting fully immersed in it. If we've mentioned it, I've, got a couple rice blinds this year. I had my first blind last year just because I wanted to look for the opportunity to be able to hunt. I mean, I was with 3 kids at that, or 2 and a pregnant wife. It was getting a little harder to let me sit in a sweat line or a lottery and then a sweat line the next day. So I needed some opportunities to come a little bit and just do, single day trips and things like that. But the Sac Valley lets you do that. I mean, that's just my opinion of it. I love it. What about you?
It's funny you mentioned those single day trips, and I think back to last year, and I know you had a little one on the way, but I will say I feel like more times than not, you still towed that trailer down, and we still spent a full weekend out there. So we were definitely getting after it, but. Yeah, I'm going to have to lean towards the Sac Valley as well. I mean, obviously just a ton of opportunity. The proximity's amazing. I mentioned the different types of hunting that, we can do, early on when, I was renting rice blinds, that was awesome. But then, you think about the refuges and, there's some that, are, I'm 35 minutes from Sutter here, a little over an hour to Sacramento or Delavan. So great opportunities. Obviously getting up in the upper Butte Basin, that's a lot of fun. I really enjoy hunting there. But yeah, no, I'd have to say the Sacramento Valley for sure.
Absolutely. And where else can you sit on I-5 and listen to a podcast with a couple of guys? I mean, come on.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, that's a great thing. We didn't even mention that, but hey, we'll be on Spotify, we'll be on Apple, pretty much anywhere you listen to your podcast, that's where we'll be. So once again, don't forget, follow us on Instagram for the Fowlers. Hey, we were talking a little bit about the refuge and, public opportunities, private opportunities. I figure we just do a quick dive into that for, maybe there's someone who's just getting into hunting or has a little bit of interest here in getting into hunting in California. when we talk about, public opportunities, we're mostly talking about the refuge system. And I mean, there's places up and down, California, but obviously the majority of those refuges that you're going to be hunting waterfowl are basically from the Grasslands north up through the Sacramento Valley. And then, those private opportunities, those leased blinds, those clubs, etc. Caden, obviously you do both, what would you say are the pros and cons of each style, whether it's public or private?
I mean, I'm still, I'm a refuge guy. I just think that's just the best hunting. That's just what it's meant to, that's what hunting's meant to be. I mean, if I had it my way, I would find a way on a refuge every hunt, and I'd never sit in another rice blind. That being said, I'm always looking to get another rice blind. I think the pros of a refuge are, you never know where you're going to be. I mean, you could have, short of having the golden ticket at a refuge, like you don't know what you're going to do. Even if you're going free roam and you've got the perfect X, you could have some guy and his dad who haven't been on the refuge before, and they just stumble on your X, which is, I mean, that's the fun. So it's now you got to walk, a lot more further. Don't do a little bit further. Set up far away from those guys. Let them have a good hunt. But you're hunting somewhere new. You're hunting toolies that you've never seen before. You can't beat that. I mean, that's what tests you as a hunter. That's what I think gives you the most reward. That's what I like to do. I mean, in a perfect world, when I'm retired and, my kids are older and I'm not, changing diapers all day, that's what I hope to do. I hope to take that. I say it now with confidence, but I hope to take the step back out of the rice blinds and hunt more refuges.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned that golden ticket, and, obviously when we mention golden ticket, we mean that number one resi at the refuge. And I got to ask, Caden, have you ever gotten the golden ticket?
I've drew it once, right? Yeah. One time.
Where was that?
That was Llano. We had it for Llano Seco.
Did I go with you on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Now I had to think about it. Yeah, we definitely did, because I went up the day before where I scouted it, because it was a Sunday golden ticket.
Okay.
Which is still golden, not as golden, but still golden. And it was a refuge. It was, I think, my second season. I think it was back when I would just send you, hey, I'm putting in for draws. Tell me what to do. And you would just kind of give me the list. And I just would open up the credit card and hope I could afford whatever I was buying. But anyways, yeah, so we drew Llano, and it was a unique experience because of, there's certain refuges where if you have the number one ticket, everyone should know what blind you're going to get. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. Llano for me was not one of those. It's still, I'm a lot more familiar with it, but even then I'm like, because it's a unique refuge. It's got some blinds and it's got some ponds. And from hunting me, I love ponds over a blind. It's just, the ADD kicks in. I'm like, well, we could move 100 feet over there. I think that's where the ducks are going to be. So that's how I like to hunt. Doesn't always work out in my favor, but it's what I like to do. But anyways, back to Llano, that was the golden ticket, and it was a good opportunity. It was a learning experience because, there's guys that you had to ask some questions, had to go there early, did a lot, as much research as I could, talked to some people that hunted it in the past years just made the most of it. It was a good hunt.
Yeah, you mentioned, obviously every refuge has that number one or two location depending on your resi. It's a no-brainer. Head here. Don't even overthink it, right? But I guess my advice for anyone out there that gets that number one and you're not quite sure where to go, best place to go, the NorCal Rice and Refuge page on Facebook. Go ahead and let people know, hey, I got number one in a couple weeks. Where do I go? And well, I'm sure
you're guaranteed to get good advice.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we're joking here, and it's funny. We obviously have fun with that page, but yeah, that page can be brutal.
Yeah, I've seen some guys drug through the coals for just honest questions. God forbid I ever have to ask something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what it is about Llano. I've had two golden tickets. One was at YOLO. 7-8 years ago, had a good hunt there. But then this past season, I had a number one.
Right.
And the Upper Butte Basin flooded out. So Lana
Yeah.
was closed, Little Dry Creek was closed. And I think it was a Sunday draw as well, because I will say, as much as we talk, trash about the Facebook page, you do get some good information there. And I remember that Saturday, they were actually having the check station staff, I think, drive around the refuge telling people, hey, roads are flooding out, come on out. Like they were basically pulling people out of their hunts early. So I knew not to go up there for that Sunday hunt that, my number one, unfortunately, was going to be burned. That being said, I think I had a number 4 either the next week or 2 weeks later, and it was my best hunt of the year. So, it all worked out.
Exactly. And you've hunted a couple other number ones, haven't you? Or at least one that I know of.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Obviously,
No?
I've had mine. I went out on
Did
yours.
you have a little Dry Creek one?
No. We never had number 1 there.
Oh, well, I think any ticket, let me rephrase, any ticket there might just be a golden ticket.
Yeah, that day at Dry Creek, that's another episode right there. But
fair enough.
That was kind of a waste of a resi for.
I think we need to do the whole episode on just hunts that should be forgotten, but no, they shouldn't be forgotten because they should be talked about because they were so good or bad.
Yeah, that everything about that hunt. I mean, even the drive up from the Bay Area and all, it'll be a story for another day. Write it down. We'll talk about it, but it's a good one. But yeah, so I mentioned we're on the cusp of opening day for the balance of the state here in California. Waterfowl season 2026 opens up in less than a week. We talked earlier, I think this is season 5 or 6 for you. I'm at the look back. I know it's been at least 10, so I'm thinking it's like 11 or 12 seasons for myself. But Caden, what are you most looking forward to this season?
Oh man, on the spot. What am I looking forward to? Well, this will be my first. Like last year, I had a little 2-man blind with a family member, and it was a good time. And this year, I'm hunting with a good buddy of ours, Chuck, and all of his buddies on a couple different rice blinds. So it's going to be a new experience. I got a dog who's, I don't even know how to describe him. He's crazy. He's a good dog, but he's a handful. So he's going to have to learn some blind manners, which it'll be definitely an experience because Chuck's got a great pup and well behaved and all that, and I've got an absolute firecracker. I mean, he knows what to do, but he's a lot to handle. So I'm excited to get out there and kind of get that new experience of hunting with some new guys, working the dog when I can, hunting some new property, seeing how it works out.
Yeah, you mentioned Chuck, and I've already talked to him about coming on and, talking a little bit about his hunting background and, his pup, I know his pup he's been working with for a few years, and she's just an absolute amazing dog. But I wouldn't sell yourself too short on old Rooster there, your pup, because I think what he's going into is maybe 3rd full season. And for a dog that, you and your wife found just walking down the street as a stray, he's getting better year after year.
Yeah, his drive is, I'd put his drive up there against some of the best dogs I've seen. Like if he'll chase a bird across across a field longer than anyone, but it's just some of those blind manners. He get like, just side story, his manners for me, that way the listeners know what I'm talking about, is you're sitting there 10 minutes before shoot light. You're having your last minute snack or a sip of coffee while you're looking at your time and triple checking, when you can actually start shooting birds. And you get the damn teal who splashes in the decoys. Holy shit, my dog will just get so damn excited. And I can't blame him. That's what he wants. He hears bird hit the water. He's ready to go.
Yep.
So we're going to work on that this year, though.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I got to say, for this season, I'm just looking forward to all the different opportunities that I'm gonna have this year. Obviously, I talked a little bit about those kind of exclusive hunts that we've been invited to. I told you a little earlier about that hunt that we got to save the date for early January. So that'll be nice. I'm calling it like our birthday hunt because remind me, I know I'm January 3rd for my birthday. You're the 2nd or the 4th? I knew you're one day. 4th. Okay. So yeah, I think that hunt's the 2nd and 3rd or the 3rd and 4th. So that'll be a fun hunt. So that'll be a good one for us to go out on. And then, obviously just, we talked about starting this podcast here. I'm excited to connect with more hunters out there, at the check stations or, just driving around town when we're up there, whether it's, we're grabbing a bite to eat in Calusa or, we're sitting at the bar at Granzella's in Williams, just, kind of talking to some folks and, kind of just swapping stories.
Exactly. And I'm looking forward to it. And I know this year's definitely will be yours and my. It'll be a lot of firsts. Being a new dad and balancing the kid and keeping the wife happy while still maintaining to keep a job is a fun experience. I think I'll actually say I've mastered that skill set somehow. I've gotten away with pretty much anything, luckily. But I think I can hopefully pass on some tips and pointers to you.
For sure. We talked about what we're most looking forward to, and I know you talked about working with your pup and stuff like that, but, outside of, working with Rooster, maybe what's one or two things that you want to work on this year to better improve your hunting success?
Oh, for me, especially hunting the rice, coming from the refuge, big duck hunter. I've always thought I was a duck hunter, wasn't a goose hunter. Definitely have killed my fair share of geese. Hunting the rice, and I feel like you get a few more opportunities on a more consistent basis. I really got to step up my goose calling game. I got to be honest. You've heard it. It's not the best, but I've put some hours on the call while driving down the road and gotten a little bit better. I've watched every crummy YouTube tutorial that I could, and hopefully I can say I called one in on my own.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I think for myself, what's funny is, we were talking a little earlier before we started the show, I got that new gun last year and, I was out shooting it the other day and I just realized that, I got to do a better job of just making sure that I'm leading better. I know I'm leaving some shots out there and, even though I still feel good when I, at the end of the hunt, I know that there's maybe one or two birds that if I just was a little more patient or maybe just led a little more, and, quit missing behind and stuff like that. That's definitely something that, once again, we're not experts, not professionals, we're getting better every day, but that's definitely something that I want to work on this year to make sure I'm not leaving, missing those shots. Cause we talked a little bit about how crowded it can be. Sometimes you just are not on the X, but you got to take advantage of those birds that are coming in and that are willing to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I probably should say that's going to be mine as well. I definitely always need to make sure my shots are a little bit more accurate, but managing those highs and lows. I mean, you ever have those weekends when you go out, it's like Saturday, you can't hit the broadside of a barn and then all you're doing is looking at your gun like it's broken. And the next day, all of a sudden you drop your limit as quickly as possible. So it'd be cool to work out some of those kinks. I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever figured out the secret sauce, but maybe this is my year to do it.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll admit it, and if anyone out there says, oh, I've never had to do it, I call BS on that, but we've all done the walk of shame where, hey, those 25 shells went real fast and you only have 2 or 3 birds on the strap, right? So you got to walk back, do the 2-mile walk back to the parking lot on the refuge, whatever it might be, go get another box of shells, to try to fill your strap or, more times than not, it's the hunting shut down for the day, right? So you just got your steps in. But on the flip side, and I was mentioning that Llano hunt I had last season, I could not miss that day. And I remember thinking I'm going to get 7, I was counting how many shells, I was going through. And I want to say I ended up at 15 or 16 shells, just to fill the strap. So, I mean, that was good shooting for me for sure.
Yeah, and I think I talked to you that morning. You had almost all your birds well under that, and then you took a few extra shots to get that final one. Mm-hmm. But that's just how it goes. I mean, I took a junior out during the Northeastern junior hunt this year, and phenomenal shot. I think it was last year as a junior hunt, but I mean, great shot. And we're out there, and we killed a lot of big birds real early. I think we got 6 down. I'd already called his dad. I'm like, yep, we're coming home early. And I can say we did not come home early. It took a lot more shots to get a seventh final bird. It was actually quite impressive. It was good times though. But hey, there's a kid 17 years old out there, probably he's out shooting me and getting big birds up in the Northeastern. The only reason I was there is to make it legal. So it was a good time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of time, we're kind of getting up on about an hour here. So what do you say we start closing this one out, this pilot episode?
Absolutely.
Here? Yeah. I got this idea from listening to some other podcasts, but I was just thinking before we go, we'd ask a couple questions of each other here just to kind of get to know, what kind of hunter you are. And, I'll ask you, and then maybe you throw it back at me and we'll close out there. So you game?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got?
All right. So this one's a simple one. What shotgun and which gauge do you use?
Oh,
what's your primary
this year,
shotgun?
I'm going to go with this year because I think we're going to do an episode where we talk all about guns, right?
Yes.
So this year, my primary gun is going to be my Franke Affinity 20 gauge. I picked it up last year. Was really excited about it. Used it for a little bit, then went back to my trusty old 12, but I ran into some issues at the end of the season and I didn't fix it since then. So I just made the decision 2025 is the year of the 20 gauge.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of hype around that sub gauge and a lot of 20 gauges. I'm even hearing some folks going out there with the 28 as well. It's funny, speaking of 20 gauge, and you mentioned that Franke. I got one of those last year, and it's a great gun. Obviously, I did my research on it. I know that you like yours, but this one here's giving me a little trouble, so I'm gonna have to take it into the old gunsmith and have him take a look at it. But the last few years, as you know, I've been shooting my Benelli Super Black Eagle 3. I absolutely love that thing. It gives me no issues. Took a little time trying to make sure I had the right shell for it because there was, some issues with ejecting and stovepiping and stuff like that. But no, I absolutely love that gun. I love the weight. I love the way it shoulders, everything about it.
Yeah, I've seen you shoot it. It's a good-looking gun. It's one of the ones I'm looking to get. Maybe. We'll see. I've got it narrowed down to between two guns and that and approval from the wife of what my next shotgun will be. So that's good stuff.
Yeah. How about this next one? What waders do you wear?
Here we go.
What brand of waders do you wear, Caton?
Well, with the flattest bill I can find, I do wear my Sitka waders. Yeah. I'm a fan. I had so many bad hunts with, a cheap wader does its own good. I do love a neoprene wader, but I was just done and I ripped the Band-Aid off 3 years ago, maybe 3-4 seasons ago. And I love them. Haven't had any issues. I haven't had a set of waders last longer. So make fun of the brand all you want. It works.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm not going to make fun of you because after last year, like they say, I became a Sitka bro as well. But
and you held out for a long while.
I did, but I'll be honest with you. Sitka makes an amazing wader, and I'm not going to knock any other brands, but as we all know, we're pretty hard on our waders, especially us public land folks. We're in and out of tules, we're climbing in and out of pit blinds, and just our waders take a beating. And I was just having issues, and I tried multiple brands where they would maybe last 2 years, 3 years. And by the time an issue pops up, the warranty's over, right? So finally last season, I made the plunge. I bought a pair of Sitka waders, and honestly, the best investment, probably even more than my Super Black Eagle. Those waders are absolutely amazing. Not one issue with them. And what's nice is I know that if something does come up, I do have an issue with them, we know about their warranty, right? So,
and there's a bunch of new good waders out there up in that $1,000 range, and I'm sure that my buddies picked up the Kuyus. They're great. I think that's a topic for another day, but that's where you and I landed. We know there's a lot of love and a lot of hate for the brand, so we enjoy it.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we say, because we said we're going to be talking to new hunters, some folks just getting started. Trust me, you can go out and buy a pair of $100, $150 waders. You do not need to go out and spend $300, $400,
I'm a big neoprene guy.
Hey, I wore neoprene for a while, right? And
I still think it's better.
people always are like, how do you wear neoprene? You hear these guys that are, walking out to wherever they're going to go hunt in their sweats and muck boots and just to put the waders on out there. But I never had an issue with them. So,
No, I loved the neoprene. I just didn't find a set with a comfortable enough boot. That's what Sitka needs is like throw some more money at it. Give me a neoprene wader. That'll be cool.
I don't know if they would do that because, they're all about their layering system and stuff like that.
I
So,
know.
but yeah, no, it's an amazing brand. And I know we're talking them up right now. They already have our money, but, who knows? Maybe if this podcast takes off, maybe one day we'll be able to announce them as a official sponsor of For the Fowlers.
Oh yeah. We'll get our own pattern.
Yeah. Well, this next one's kind of an or you don't have to answer both parts, but as we close out here, what would be a piece of advice for a new waterfowler, or maybe you have a recommendation for an experienced waterfowler?
Oh, I'm not going to go give any pros some advice. I don't want to have to just be drugged through the coals. For a new guy, and this will be an interesting opinion, regulations are scary. Don't be afraid to go. I mean, it's all about, everyone talks about scouting, know where to go. Go to the checks. If you're not going to hunt that day, or if it's new and maybe you can't make it out in the morning because your kid's got football or something, drive up to the refuge, talk to the check station and really get a feel for those regulations. Talk to the old green jeans, the wardens out there. Go out there and do that. They're a wealth of knowledge. I mean, they're not, obviously when they're out there, they're in an enforcement action. So I'm sure lots of guys got lots of great stories about running into wardens, but at the end of the day, get the information from the horse's mouth, and those check station guys are a big help. And then the wardens are obviously the final say on a lot of things, and learn what you're doing. Regulations change. This year we got the 3 pintail and the weird one that I don't even know all the information about. I just saw January 1st, you can actually go after some swans.
Yeah, the mute swan.
We can't even go down that. Yeah, we can't go down that rabbit hole right now. But yeah, once I myself am going to double check on that rig, and I can guarantee you, if it all checks out by January 2nd, I will have a swan. That's my goal.
Well, I would say my advice to new waterfowlers, in addition to what you said, is, you talked a lot about regulations, but, is study up on that waterfowl ID too, right? Make sure that you know what you're shooting, because speaking of swans, you and I know someone who probably needed to know waterfowl ID a little bit better, but hey, if it happened this year or after January 1st, he's legal, right? But
hey, hypothetically, that could have been the biggest snow I've ever not seen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, in all seriousness, obviously, get to know your regulations, your waterfowl ID. Caton's right. Go up to the check stations, talk to the check station staff, talk to the wardens. If you see them out there, you'll see them driving through, pretty much all over the valley. You see them, wave them down, talk to them. We've gotten to know a couple folks, and we've had good interactions with them. It's funny, when I was kind of thinking about future episodes, I know a couple guys just through your travels, Kate, and I think it'd be kind of cool to get one of those guys on for an episode to talk a little bit about.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, what they kind of run into out there, how we can be better hunters. And yeah, I think it'd be a good episode for us to talk about in the future. But yeah.
And when you go to the check, don't ask the check station at 4 a.m. That's a job for a different time. Don't hold us up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Speaking of teasing episodes, that will be one of those unwritten rule episodes that we talk about. And I will give a teaser to that. One of the unwritten rules, or my biggest pet peeve, when you're at the check station, it's 4 or 5 a.m. We're checking in. Know where you're going to go. Don't step up to the window. Quick. Yeah, let's keep it moving, right? So we'll talk more about that in a future episode. But yeah, Caton, I think it's time we wrap this one up.
Yeah, I think we did halfway decent. We made it. Only one technical error. I like it.
Yeah, we'll see how this all turns out. But yeah, that's going to be a wrap on the first episode of For the Fowlers. Obviously, it was great chatting, Caton. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. I think we have some good topics that we want to talk about. I know we have a wish list of guests that we'd love to have come on in future episodes. But, before we close out, I just want to say, once again, follow us on Instagram, For the Fowlers. Send us a message. If you follow us on Instagram, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts of, this episode, the podcast, what you like, what we could do better, just connect with us. And we're still trying to figure out kind of how often we want to be releasing these episodes, but I think our plan is to try to do at least one a week. And with that said, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, Caden, have a good one.
You too.
Bye.